Hello and welcome back to Module 2 of the Shapes of Grief training program. In this module, we're going to be looking at certain types of grief. There are many different types of grief, and there are many ways to grieve. But in this module, we're going to be looking at prolonged grief disorder and prolonged grief therapy, and hopefully dispelling some of the myths that are around about this very real condition, prolonged grief. We'll also be looking at anticipatory grief, the grieving that we go through when we're waiting for someone to die, or even perhaps after they've received a difficult diagnosis. We already begin to anticipate what our life might be like when they're gone. So this is known as anticipatory grief. I've also had the immense privilege of interviewing one of my heroes, Dr. Pauline Boss, who talks about ambiguous loss. There are different kinds of ambiguous loss. For example, after 9/11, when people were missing, but we had no bodies. So they were missing, presumed dead. It's a kind of ambiguous loss. Or for many of us living with a parent with dementia, they're not dead, but we've lost something. You know, they might be physically present, but emotionally absent. So we look at different types of ambiguous loss and how it relates to us throughout our lives and how to support people who are experiencing ambiguous loss. I also interviewed Dr. Kenneth Doka, and there's a really nice discussion there about disenfranchised grief. What is it? Who suffers from disenfranchised grief? It broadens our awareness of what is grief and who grieves. So really interesting discussion there with Dr. Kenneth Doka. We also touch on gender and grief. He did some of the first research on how different genders grieve. And the evolution of that is now we've moved beyond gender, and we now recognize that it's not so much women grieve this way or men grieve that way, because that leaves out a whole cohort of people, non-binary people also. But we look more now at grieving styles, instrumental grievers, intuitive grievers. What does that mean? And when we can understand that there are many different styles of grieving, we stop judging people's grief. We stop judging the way they grieve. And this is really important, particularly if we're supporting couples, to understand that they might have different styles of grieving. So enjoy the module. I hope you find it a rich and educational experience. I'm sure you will.